Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including Republican proposals to increase penalties for certain protest activities. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalists Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Howie Fisher from Capital Media Services, Jeremy Duda of Axios Phoenix, and Cameron Sanchez of KJZZ Radio. Panel, good to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us, Howie. We're starting with you. Lots of bills, a few bills here, focusing on people who protest in not necessarily the right way. What's going on here?
Well, there's a right way and a wrong way. And a right way is you say, yes, of course we like what you're doing, Mr. Trump. And then there's every other way. Obviously, a lot of this comes out of what happened in Minneapolis and in other cities. And so they're going through the criminal statutes and saying, well, okay, but we've got people trying to coerce the government to do something. Well, coercion is also persuasion. That is the nature of protest. But this would make it a crime to try to coerce change in government. There's also language in there that says that if you're trying to subvert the American or Arizona processes. Well, what does subversion mean? I mean, the nature of protest, the nature of all of this stuff is to say, we don't like the way you're doing things, so have you suddenly committed a felony?
Yeah, and this legislation, Jeremy, includes something we've talked about before, would be making it illegal to warn someone of federal agents coming to arrest you. There would be a new civil terrorism classification. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah, but a lot of bills and a lot of different proposals in there. And I think probably one of the most interesting features of several of these bills is that a lot of the stuff they're targeting is already illegal. You know, destroying property, blocking traffic, things like that. But this ratchets up kind of the penalties, creates new classifications. You mentioned civil terrorism. So it's really trying to make these more severe penalties in a lot of cases, make it easier to prosecute people, giving law enforcement, police, a lot more latitude in what they're arresting people for, what people are being charged with. And this is obviously, of course, in response to, how we mentioned the right way and the wrong way, protesters who are, to the Republicans in the legislature, protesting for causes that they do not support, and that is kind of the crux of the issue. And in a lot of cases, doing things, sometimes doing things that are well within their constitutional rights, sometimes going very much out of bounds in what they're doing and breaking the law. But it all comes down to, I think, kind of what they are protesting about.
And we're talking about felony charges here. I mean,
we're talking about potentially time, felonies. And I think for me, probably the most interesting one is if you're warning someone, if you're like blowing, making a loud noise, for example, to alert people to the presence of like ICE agents, for example. Stuff like that being considered obstruction. And this kind of ties into other conversations we've had, like Annalise Ortiz posting about ICE agents around her community. And, when people do that and they're looking out for one another, is that obstructing the law? And should they be felons for that? Or is that part of your legal right to communicate, protest, free speech, et cetera?
And that's really the crucial part of it. Now, John Kavanaugh, who's pushing this, says, well, if you just happen to see an ICE vehicle or any other vehicle and you happen to blow a whistle, that's fine. But if you were blowing a whistle specifically knowing they are seeking person A, then and trying to warn that person, and that's
how do you know?
How do you
enforce that?
Well, it comes down to his example is, let's say you're working in a restaurant and ICE comes in, they're looking for somebody, and so you run in the back and tell that person, vamoose, get out of here. Now, the problem becomes, where are the First Amendment rights? I have a First Amendment right to blow a whistle, to take a bullhorn, to say, la migra, whatever. But somehow they're going ahead and saying, I think they're trying to chill speech. And I think that's really what's behind this.
Sure, and there seems like there's a lot of vagueness, a lot of gray area. Are you making a general warning? If you blow a whistle or yell to alert, the folks in the back of the kitchen, do you know those people are here, if they're undocumented? You suspect, are there some who are and some who aren't? Are you giving a specific warning or just kind of a general warning just in case, saying, hey, just in case this is, applies to you, get out of here?
I don't think I'd be going out on a limb to say this would probably end up in court. and that the judge might not be a huge fan of it because it would tie into those First Amendment rights.
Well, am I going out on a limb saying that this is not going to get past the governor's desk?
No, well, there's that as well. Well, there's also always the possibility in Arizona these days of things going to the ballot, and I don't know that voters would like it either. I think overall it's just maybe not the temperature.
Let's talk about going to the ballot, Howie. Apparently, what, is the ballot going to be a Russian novel this year? I mean, holy smokes, how many things are they referring?
Well, War and Peace was a very nice novel if you happen to have the whole summer to read it. The problem becomes, as Cameron points out, is that the go-to methodology of lawmakers when you can't get stuff by the Democratic governor is, we'll just take it to the people. And they believe certain things the people want. I mean, there are some things that maybe she is, quote unquote, out of step on. Who gets to use what bathrooms in the schools and showers and things like that. But everything else, I think, is there to somehow make a point, whether it's domestic terrorism, whether it's, going ahead and deciding, who is guilty of which particular crimes. And again, the idea is we want to load up the ballot. Now, the problem they come into, and I worked on a ballot measure years and years ago, is when the ballot is loaded up, and people are confused, you vote no. You start out on the no side. You start with 60% of the vote. Because people say, what's the problem? What are we trying to fix there? And so it's very rare, like a Prop 139, which is abortion, which clearly broke away from the pack. But in general, if people don't know what it does, what are you solving, they vote no.
And they take their time voting no because there are a lot of things to vote no on. That takes time at polling places. It takes time to get these votes tallied because at the longer ballot, we've run into this in the past few years. I mean, holy smokes, Jeremy, are we going to have a redo of election denialism and questions and the whole 9 yards?
Oh, I think we might have a redo of, a couple of years ago when the ballot was so long, it was actually 2 separate pieces of paper. And that was the first time, I think, in, 20 years, they had that. And, going back to Howie's point, if people don't understand it, they're going to vote no. And the more that's on there, the less they're going to understand, because people are just going to say too long, didn't read. And another thing is that I think legislative leadership used to have a little more discretion in terms of what they would let go through on that, because they want to make sure if something's going to the ballot and you want it to pass, you want to make sure there's actually going to be a campaign. Who's going to run this? Who's going to put money into it? Does anyone actually care enough to do this? You have 20 ballot, 10, 15, 20 ballot measures. No one's putting money into all of these things.
And that's the thing. I mean, some of these things, look, the bathroom bill is going to go on the ballot because, that's one of those touchstones they think people understand. Speaker Montenegro has a bill. We already have laws and voter-approved laws about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. But there's a loophole in here, so we want to put that on the ballot. I mean, is this really the kind of thing people saying, what is going on that we really need to amend the Constitution or amend the statute?
But Cameron, let's say there are 20. Let's say there are 20 ballot measures on there, and no one's is all excited about all 20.
We are.
Well, of course you are. But if you get different people excited about different things, does that improve turnout, in this case, for the Republicans?
Depends. I think it also goes down to the simplicity of those measures, kind of what Jeremy was saying, but also in a different vein, like the marketing and packaging of it. If it's something like complicated groundwater policy and the grandfathered irrigation rights in this, section, people are already falling asleep, skipping it, whatever. But if it's something like, protesters bad, sent to prison, people understand that more clearly. And if you can label it something like the stopping evil protesters from destroying our cities, then people maybe take a more favorable view of it. And that's what we see a lot with ballot measures is it's a lot about the wording and the packaging, and they fight over every little thing. Like with the abortion measure, there was a long fight over the word fetus and whether or not they could use that.
Oh, I can't wait for the titling fights on these 20 titling fights, perhaps?
Yeah, at least 10 if there's 20.
Yes.
If there's 20 measures.
Yeah. All right, Jeremy, sticking with you, I want one more of these ideas regarding protesting and increasing penalties for protesters. There also is a bill banning protests in or near churches, houses of worship, these sorts of things. Again, how is this enforced?
I'm a little shaky. There's so many of these things that don't know all the details on all of them, but this is inspired by, of course, we saw the incident in Minnesota where, Don Lemon and other journalists and the protesters were all charged federally. So, again, this is in response to, a lot of the things we've been seeing in other parts of the country.
But you get into some real definitional problems there. Maybe no protest in front of schools. What about daycare? Or no protests in churches, but what if you have a religious meeting room? Quakers have meeting houses. Mm-hmm. And then you get into some of the First Amendment stuff of why should, it's one thing to say, for example, there are drug-free zones around schools. And there's a reason for that, which has to do with interference with education, with being around children. why should a church be subject to some different rules? Now, you can get into issues of disturbing something, but there are already laws against doing things that disturb the peace. Again, this is a problem in search of a solution.
Cameron, there's a bill with local police contacting ICE immediately if they think that someone is in the country illegally. Talk to us more about this.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of those 287G agreements that we can have, but basically requiring local enforcement to be in touch with ICE and to turn people over, pretty much as soon as they have them, have reason to believe that they might be undocumented, which I think begs the question of, how would we implement that, and how would that work with our legal system? Because we are supposed to have due process, and we have rules that we're currently following. So if we change them, what would be the logistics of that? I don't know if we really have the answers to those questions yet, and I don't know that municipalities are going to appreciate it because it would potentially be making more work for law enforcement officers.
Yeah, due process, Jeremy, is it lost in this one?
Potentially. I mean, and we already have, this is kind of an extension. If you remember, everyone remembers SB 1070, the never-ending fight over that. This is kind of similar to one of the main provisions in there about, forcing, police officers to determine, the legality, the legal status of people if they have reason to believe. And then you get into questions over, well, what constitutes reason to believe? There's, prohibitions in the law against racial profiling, but how do you enforce that?
And that's important because while much of 1070, as we know, was voided by the U.S. Supreme Court and by the Ninth Circuit, that provision remained because it said to officers, if it's reasonable to do, and you have reason to believe, and if you've stopped someone for any other reason, you should go ahead and call immigration authorities. This becomes a problem of, at the moment of arrest, first of all, how do you determine if somebody is here illegally? Well, you happen to have let's say a Sonora driver's license. Does that make you here illegally? And this comes down to the whole 287 agreement, which is when police are trained on immigration law. If you're not trained on immigration law, tell me how you determine the legality, the immigration status of someone based on what? The color of their skin?
And again, this is local law enforcement, which right now I think the law is you can't get in the way. You can't, do that sort of thing, forcibly get in the way of federal action. But this is, you're required to call federal action.
And do it quickly.
Yeah.
And it's part of, again, an effort that we've seen since President Trump came into office of wanting to be in line and in step with those immigration and deportation efforts from Arizona Republicans, with expanding 287G agreements, with legislation, with statements, with basically everything they've got.
Yeah. Jeremy, there's a proposal, it sounds like, to push Arizona to have its own census. What's this all about?
This is about redistricting, which a nerdy issue that most people probably don't care about, but I love. So
I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
So, the federal, and this has become an issue, federally, where President Trump tried to do this in his first term, count only citizens. The Constitution says you just make a count of everyone. So you can't really do that at the state level for federal redistricting. But at the state level, they believe they can do that, through means I don't think are completely clear how the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission would have its own census. But the point is you cut out folks who are not citizens, and that puts Democrats at a major disadvantage because a lot of these Democratic districts, you have, Senator Hoffman, who's behind this proposal, talked about, illegal immigrants. It's all immigrants, any non-citizen, and those folks get counted for population. The districts have to have pretty equal population. If you take those folks out, you have to start moving a lot of more folks in there. That means you take Democrats, you dilute the Democratic districts, you pull them out of more competitive districts, and that gives Republicans a decided advantage.
But the mechanism is the real problem here. So first of all, we're going to have two sets of people coming to your door. People say, wait, I just answered a census, so I'm not answering this thing. You have issues of, do you really want somebody coming to your door and saying, are you a citizen? I mean, I would tend to lie just because I'd like to screw things up for these folks. But then you have mixed households where you may have somebody who is here legally, and then you get the question of not just here legally, are you a citizen or are you a green card holder where you're entitled to be here illegally? Where do they fit into the issue? And the odds of getting an accurate count based on this, and as somebody said, let's see, sending a bunch of people out chosen by, I don't know, Jake Hoffman to go door to door. What could possibly go wrong?
And this would be, as far as as it was mentioned here, this is a show me your papers by any other name, is it not?
Yes, but by request, which means there would be some response bias, as Howie mentioned. I assume, because for a few reasons. One, people might have a chilling effect. They're worried they're going to get in trouble. Like, is this a law enforcement officer coming to my door? Is this an ICE agent? Am I in trouble for something because they're asking me about my status? And also, they might not think it's legit if, again, they've already answered because we have the U.S. Census question. So they're like, this seems like a weird situation. I don't know who you are.
An important point is we're talking about the ballot measure. This is another thing that would go on the ballot.
Right.
Again, further lengthening it, further making people spend more time at their kitchen table, assuming we haven't yet killed mail-in voting.
If they are at their kitchen table and they look at something like this, would voters go for it?
I think certain voters will. I'd say that any measure like that starts out with a base of 35%. The question is, for other people, could they be convinced that this is more trouble than it's worth? It is a cost to the thing, maybe $5 to $50 million, depending on how you put it together. And what have you accomplished if all you're doing is changing the chairs in the Titanic, because there'll still be 30 legislative seats, and it was just a question of how the maps are.
Yeah, but you're going pretty deep there. Is this the kind of flash issue that can maybe stick out a little more than the others if you got a whole bunch of referrals, a whole bunch of measures there on the ballot?
If there's a lot of things in the ballot, I don't know. I think if there were fewer things, it's something that a lot of voters might look at and say, oh, yeah, sure, you should only count some citizens for redistricting, without kind of looking at some of the other issues, like how do you pay for it, how do you do a completely separate second census, and all those other details. But if it's one of 15 things on the ballot, is anyone actually going to stop and read it long enough to care?
Yeah. Cameron, there's a move as well for the state to decide when elections in municipalities should occur. It's the old state versus local argument.
Yes, and not the first time that we've had this argument either. But once again, we would be taking it to the people, right? And so this is a Mesnard proposal, and it's kind of getting around, I think, the last time we had a ruling on this, because there are places like Tucson, for example, who have a different election timeline. And the argument from Mesnard and some other Republicans is like, well, it's basically annoying because voters have to go and vote in more elections than they should have to. Let's just consolidate and have this election day that's state mandated, and everyone's going to love it. Whereas Tucson is like, we don't love it. We like having our own thing. And this court has asserted our power of local control over elections to do what we're already doing, so butt out.
And it's charter cities here.
And that's
Howie.
the charter cities. There are like 17 charter cities in the state, Chandler, Prescott, Tucson, as you mentioned, Tempe. And as you point out, the Supreme Court has said the Constitution says you have powers. This would amend the Constitution and get around the Supreme Court ruling. Now we're down to the issue of why do cities want local elections separate? Well, what have we been talking about all night? The length of the ballot. Because remember, we're going to have on the ballot, we're starting with the governor's race, or in a presidential year, a presidential race, all the way down the members of Congress, the members of the legislature, 87,000 ballot measures, the judge retention things. And then at the bottom, if you're not already asleep, are the city issues.
But is this, I thought that I'd read that it was the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. I mean, as far as even numbered years, are they trying to get a little separation there, or could they not possibly care less?
I don't think they could care less, because there's really two arguments about this. And there's the Tucson argument, which is, well, we want our own set. People will pay more attention to these city issues. If it's on one city ballot, you're just voting in Tucson, mayor, your council member, maybe local propositions. But the flip side of that is turnout, and that's the argument that Republican lawmakers have made a lot, which is, if you have a, November off-year election, your turnout's going to be, half or less of what, regular November election. And the Republican argument has long been that's, basically voter suppression. Yeah.
Jeremy stole the really great point that I was about to make. But yeah, it's basically like you're consolidating it, and then everyone's going to get it knocked out at once. And if they already are showing up for like the big fancy presidential election, for example, then maybe it'll increase turnout for those down ballot, because if they're there, they're going to fill out the whole ballot. Or the fear is what Hallie is saying, which is people don't want to take the ACT when they go to the ballot box. They're going to fill out what they care about, and then they're going to go the heck home.
Yeah, there's this ballot drop-off, and we've seen it.
Yes, yeah. Howie, we've also seen the governor and Senator T.J. Shope kind of going back and forth regarding, call it pay to play, call it whatever you want here. But the governor went a little bit on the offensive here now.
Exactly. Well, this goes back to questions about Sunshine Residential, which provides care for foster children. They wanted a hike in their pay. They got turned down, and all of a sudden they got 2 raises back to back. But we've come to find out that Sunshine put in $100,000 into the governor's inaugural, another $300,000 into the Democratic Party, which leads to the question of pay for play. So what T.J. Shope had a bill last year said it's very simple. If you're bidding on a state contract, you have to say who you've given to in governors and governor candidates and their reforms going back 5 years. The governor vetoed it with some, right between us kids, cockamamie answer that really didn't address the issue. So she said, well, I'll come back with my own plan. Well, her own plan is, well, we'll give you a list of the people who own the corporations that bid, and then you can go out and check somewhere else and see if, in fact, they've given. Well, when T.J. Shope said no, there's loopholes in there. What about legal defense funds and inaugural funds? She sent off her press aide to say, well, look, but there's an annual financial disclosure, and he took like $5,000 in meals, and that shows that he really doesn't care about openness, except for the fact that I went back, I checked Katie Hobbs's financial disclosure going back to like 2012. She never listed any meals in those financial disclosures. So, talking about the pot calling the kettle black.
$4,900 from lobbyists, meals, entertainment. That's just last year alone. How were these found? Were they on financial statements?
Lobbyists also have to make
their
own disclosures to the Secretary of State's office. And, I think that, Governor Hobbs is highlighting something that I think a lot of people do not like about politics, about, the coziness of, lobbyists and lawmakers. The problem for her in this is I don't know if any voters are actually going to care. This is about the Sunshine Residential scandal, which has been, a big scandal. It's made the governor look very bad. I think we're going to see, $5-10 million worth of TV advertising attacking her for this in the election. And when voters see that headline that says Katie Hobbs vetoes ethics reform over pay-to-play scandal, I don't think most of them are going to read in far enough and say, oh, well, she was right to do that because it doesn't address, ban lobbyist meals and stuff like that. They're just going to see Katie Hobbs vetoed a bill meant to address the scandal that the Republicans are attacking her on. And she's kind of backed into a corner on this, so I'm not really sure what the strategy is.
And this is an old issue. You look, I've been down there, as you know, since '82. Every year the question comes up of what should be allowed. We stopped allowing certain kind of free tickets, for example, a number of years ago, when people were all going to the baseball games and the football games. But the issue of lobbyist lunches is such, lobbyists do take lawmakers out to lunch. And they say, well, I want to bend your ear. And it is reported on the lobbyist forum. But generally, lawmakers, they report out-of-town trips. For example, T.J. Shope reported, I went to certain conferences, and that was paid for.
Right.
But in terms of the individual meals, again, you want to get rid of it, fine. Her measure would say no lobbyist meals. Put in a separate bill for that. Don't try to tie it to some half-baked bill on financial disclosure.
But Cameron, as we clear away the weeds here, the governor being on the offensive here as opposed to being on the defensive, which he has been for this entire situation, does that make a difference? Is that a big deal? Does it matter at all?
I just feel like it's an apples to oranges thing. In journalism, we have something called whataboutism, which is which is where this person did something wrong, and they say, well, what about you? You also did something wrong that's entirely separate. And that's what this makes me think of. It's like, okay, well, you did this thing with Sunshine Residential, and now you're attacking Shope for not reporting how he's getting wined and dined, as I'm sure everybody is getting wined and dined, by the way. And I just don't see how that takes enough of the heat off of her overall, because it's not the same thing. And her proposal that's going to be like groundbreaking ethics reform and transparency, I'm sorry to be a little bit jaded about it. Like, we have the See the Money system through the Secretary of State's website. We have FEC. We have certain things in place now, and they're not that great. And people are often late to disclose, and I just don't really have that much faith in them, frankly.
And there's one other point about this whole Sunshine Residential thing. There are at least 2, if not 3, investigations going on. The Attorney General's office, Democratic at AG. No matter what Chris Mays rules, it's not going to help her, because if Chris Mays clears her, well, it's a Democratic AG. If Chris Mays says crimes were committed, that looks bad. You've got the one being conducted by Maricopa County attorney, and Rachel Mitchell is looking into things. And then the House has hired its own attorney. So this is going to bleed right through November 3rd.
Before we get out of here, Jeremy, there's yet another referral. This one regarding no medical mandates, putting that in the Constitution. Explain, please.
So basically prohibiting government from requiring vaccines for government facilities, schools, probably most notably, parks, government jobs. Now, I think schools, it's worth noting that there already is a very broad exemption for personal beliefs. probably one of the broadest exemptions in the country, where you don't have to. You can say, I don't want to vaccinate my kid for measles because of X or Y, and so. But this would make it so if there's an outbreak, the law still says, well, kids who aren't vaccinated, you can get sent home from school. This would prohibit that.
Yeah, and Cameron, no medical procedure mandates, no medical treatment, no mask mandates. I think we know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, sometimes I think that we've moved on from COVID, and then I'm reminded that we haven't. And it's something that people were really jaded about at the time. So I think there are actually a decent amount of Arizonans, especially, who would care about this, because Arizona is a very, in my experience, like, don't tell me what to do with myself kind of a state. And this is absolutely, obviously, being pushed by Republicans. But I think the mask thing goes like a step further, and that's the part that I'm wondering is like most ripe for a challenge there, because a medical surgery, for example, I think people would tend to agree, like, yeah, you can't force me to like cut off my arms and legs, but force me to like wear or not wear certain clothing items. Like, I mean, nobody likes being forced to do anything, but I think that might be the part where there's more of a holdup.
Howie, yay or nay again on the ballot, provided people can find it?
Oh, if people can find it, I think the idea of, you shouldn't make me do something. You shouldn't make me inject my body with something I don't want. You shouldn't make me wear a mask just because I want to go to the state office building and things like that. I think that's in terms of versus, DEI, that's something people can wrap their heads around.
Are there any caveats for health emergencies? Real quickly, we're running out of time.
But I believe there are, but I think that's people probably aren't going to read that deeply into it. They're just going to look at the top line.
Yeah.
And I think the schools thing might be something, if people don't really understand how the exemptions already work, they might just say, oh, well, we should have vaccines for schools. We have a massive measles outbreak going on right now.
All right, we'll stop it right there. Panel, good to have you here. Thank you all for joining us. That's it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Because kids will always be more curious, Arizona PBS delivers programs that serve as a trusted guide for little explorers. Thanks to you and
Arizona Theater Company presents Ain't Misbehavin', a musical review celebrating the Harlem Renaissance, Fats Waller's legacy, and the endurance of swing and jazz, featuring iconic music and choreography. February 21st through March 8th at Tempe Center for the Arts. Tickets at atc.org.
Primavera Online School now offers kindergarten through 5th grade with a project-based curriculum, digital learning activities, and small group instruction. To learn more, visit chooseprimavera.com.
coming up tonight at 7. At 7:30. At 8.
I like to think that at Arizona Horizon we are unique in the way that we